I heard my name spoken like a diagnosis before I saw anyone in the room. She doesn't remember things the way she used to, my stepson said, his voice low, practiced. The doctor agrees it's progressing. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hands still wrapped around a basket of warm laundry, the scent of clean cotton rising like steam. They were sitting at my dining table, my table, the one I refinished myself after my husband died, sanding it down on my knees, breathing in dust and grief until my hands blistered. My daughter-in-law sighed. We need to act before it gets worse, before she does something reckless. I was 68 years old, not lost, not confused. Tired, yes. Slower, maybe, but not broken. They thought I was upstairs napping. They thought I was invisible. I took a step back, my heel brushing the baseboard, and the floor creaked. The voices stopped. Silence pressed against my ears. I carried the basket into the laundry room, my arms trembling, and set it down without folding a single shirt. That was the moment everything changed. Even though it would take months before anyone else realized it. My name is Eleanor Price. I have lived in this house in Asheville, North Carolina for 34 years. I raised a daughter here. I buried a husband here. I planted the magnolia tree in the backyard the year my knees first started aching in winter. And until that afternoon, I believed I knew who my family was. I moved quietly through the rest of the day. I cooked dinner. I smiled. I asked polite questions. I listened to my stepson Mark talk about his consulting work, about clients and deadlines, about stress. I nodded while his wife Dana complained about traffic and grocery prices, and how hard it was to manage everything with 2 kids. They had moved in 8 months earlier. Temporarily, they said, just until they got back on their feet. I remembered how Mark had hugged me in the driveway, smelling of cologne and entitlement, saying, "You won't even notice we're here, Ellie." I noticed. I noticed the way my mail went missing some days. The way bills appeared already opened. The way Dana corrected me in front of the children when I told stories that didn't match her version of events. "You're mixing things up again," she'd say gently, with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. After dinner, I washed the dishes while they watched television. Laughter floated down the hall, a canned laugh track, bright and hollow. I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My hair had gone almost completely white. My face looked thinner, but my eyes were clear. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the house breathe. Pipes ticking, the hum of the refrigerator. Footsteps upstairs long after midnight. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were documents I hadn't touched in years. Deeds, insurance policies, my will. Everything neatly labeled in my handwriting, steady and precise. I flipped through the pages slowly, grounding myself in the feel of paper, the certainty of ink. The house was in my name alone. My late husband Thomas had made sure of that before cancer took him. "You'll need protection," he'd said, voice thin but stubborn. "People change when they smell opportunity." I hadn't believed him then. The next morning, I made coffee and waited. Mark came down first, already dressed, tie knotted, briefcase in hand. He froze when he saw me sitting at the table. "Morning," I said. He hesitated. "I thought you slept in on Wednesdays." "I don't forget my routines," I replied. Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance. Calculation. Dana joined us a few minutes later, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, she's here," she whispered to whoever was on the other end. "But it won't be long." I smiled at her. That afternoon, I drove myself downtown. I parked perfectly between the lines. I walked into the law office I had avoided since Thomas's funeral. The receptionist looked surprised, then pleased. "Mrs. Price, it's been a while." "Yes," I said, "but I need to talk to someone. Today." As I sat in the waiting room, listening to the quiet shuffle of papers and distant phones, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger yet, something colder, more focused. They thought they were preparing my ending. They had no idea I was already writing a different one. The lawyer's name was Samuel Green. He had been younger than me once. Now we were roughly the same age, both of us carrying the weight of years in our shoulders. "You look well," he said, and then corrected himself. "You look sharp." "I am," I said, "and I need to stay that way." I told him everything. Not in a rush. I spoke carefully, choosing my words the way I once chose stitches when I quilted. The overheard conversation, the subtle gaslighting, the opened mail, the implication that I was slipping. He listened, without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "Has anyone asked you to sign new documents?" he asked. "Or suggested updating your will or property record?" "Not yet," I said, "but they're circling." He nodded. Predatory behavior often starts softly, concern masquerading as care. He pulled my file from the archive. Everything was still clean. No changes filed, no transfers, no conservatorship petitions. "You're in control," he said. "But you need to act before they try to take that from you." I took a breath. "What are my options?" He smiled, and it wasn't unkind. "More than they think." We talked for nearly 2 hours. Asset protections, property locks, competency evaluations conducted on my terms, trust structures designed to be invisible unless activated. When I left his office, the air felt different, crisper, like the moment before a storm breaks. That evening, Mark cornered me in the kitchen. "Did you go out today?" he asked casually. "Yes." "Where?" "Downtown." He frowned. "You should let us know when you drive, just in case." "In case of what?" I asked. "In case you get confused." I met his gaze. I didn't. He looked away first. Over the next few weeks, I paid attention. I watched patterns form. I noticed how Dana's questions became more specific. "Do you remember signing anything last spring? Did you ever think about downsizing?" I answered truthfully, but minimally. Behind the scenes, I moved quietly. I scheduled my own medical evaluations. I passed them all. I locked my property records. I opened accounts they would never find. I updated my will with surgical precision. And then I did something else. I invited them to stay longer. "You don't need to rush," I said one night over dinner. "Families should take care of each other." Dana smiled so wide it hurt to look at. Mark squeezed my hand, just a second too long. That was when I knew they were fully convinced. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, they had plans. I overheard fragments, a facility tour, a financial advisor, a judge's name mentioned like a prayer. They didn't know I had already met him. On Thanksgiving morning, as the turkey roasted and the house filled with familiar smells, I stood at the sink peeling apples, my hands steady. I thought about Thomas, about the things we built, about the years I disappeared into service without noticing. I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was getting ready, and as I set the table, arranging the plates just so, I wondered which of them would realize first that the ground beneath their feet was already shifting. Thanksgiving was the first time I saw greed wearing patience like a costume. The morning began the way it always had. I woke before dawn, joints stiff, mind clear, and padded into the kitchen to begin the rituals I'd performed for decades. The turkey thawed in the sink. Sage and thyme waited on the counter. The house smelled like memory before anyone else stirred. Dana came down just after 7, already dressed, hair curled, makeup flawless. She kissed my cheek and said, "You shouldn't overdo it today. We can handle things." But she didn't touch a single dish. Mark appeared later, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. I caught fragments as he passed through the kitchen. "Yes, early next year." "No, it'll be resolved by then." She won't resist. She, not I. By noon, the house was full. Children running, football murmuring from the living room, laughter rising and falling like waves. To anyone watching, it looked warm, functional, loving. But I noticed the way Dana watched me, the way her eyes followed my hands as I chopped celery, as if waiting for them to slip. The way Mark corrected me when I said the oven timer had 10 minutes left. "It's 15, he said quickly. Too quickly. I checked. It was 10. At the table, Dana raised her glass. "I just want to say how grateful we are," she said, voice sweet, "for family, for support, for having a place to land when things get hard." Everyone murmured agreement. Mark reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "You've done so much for us, Eleanor," he said. "We don't know what we'd do without you." I smiled. I know. That seemed to unsettle him. After dessert, while the children played outside, Dana sat beside me on the couch. She smelled like vanilla and calculation. "Have you ever thought about what you want the next few years to look like?" she asked softly. "You deserve rest." "I'm not tired. I said. She tilted her head. Everyone gets tired eventually. That night, after they went to bed, I sat alone with a cup of tea, staring at the dark window. My reflection looked older in the low light, but my posture was straighter than it had been in years. The next week, Dana left a brochure on the counter. A retirement community. Sunlit halls, smiling seniors. I thought you might like to look, she said lightly. Just options. I folded it and put it in the drawer with the others. Evidence. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was watering the magnolia. Unknown number. Mrs. Price, a man said. This is Dr. Halverson. I've been contacted regarding a potential cognitive evaluation. My hand tightened on the hose. By whom? A family member expressed concern. I laughed. It surprised both of us. I'll contact you if I decide I need an evaluation, I said. Not the other way around. I hung up and stood there, water pooling around my shoes, heart pounding. They had moved sooner than I expected. That afternoon, I drove back to Samuel Green's office. They're escalating, I said. He nodded. Then it's time you do too. We finalized the trust. Silent, layered, untouchable unless I chose otherwise. I recorded a video evaluation, answering questions about dates, laws, personal history. I spoke clearly, confidently, citing statutes Samuel had prepped me on. When I finished, I felt exhilarated, alive. At home, Mark cornered me again. Someone from a clinic called, he said. They couldn't reach you. I know, I said. His jaw tightened. We're just trying to help. Then stop treating me like a problem to solve. The words hung between us. That night, I lay awake, listening to the house. It no longer felt like mine. It felt like a stage set, waiting for a scene change. I wasn't angry, yet. But the plan had moved from defense to something else. Preparation. Christmas decorations went up early that year. Dana said it was for the children, but I knew better. Red ribbons and pine garlands have a way of softening sharp intentions. They make everything look kinder than it is. I let her decorate. I watched as she rearranged my living room, moving furniture an inch at a time, testing boundaries. She replaced my framed photos with neutral holiday prints. She boxed up my old ornaments, the ones Thomas and I had collected over years of road trips and anniversaries. They're a little dated, she said. We'll keep them safe. Safe. In the garage. I retrieved them that night and put them back. She didn't mention it, but her silence was loud. Mark grew more impatient as December wore on. He stopped pretending to be unemployed. I saw him leave in suits. I found parking receipts, toll charges. When I mentioned it casually, he stiffened. Consulting meetings, he said. Nothing stable yet. I nodded. Inside, I was counting. 2 weeks before Christmas, they made their move. Dana sat me down at the dining table, hands folded, voice rehearsed. Mark stood behind her, like a shadow. We're worried, she began. You've seemed confused lately, withdrawn. I've been busy, I said. Mark cleared his throat. We've spoken to a lawyer, just to understand options. I smiled. So have I. That startled them. Dana recovered quickly. This isn't about control, it's about protection. A temporary conservatorship, just until things stabilize. I'm stable, I said. She reached across the table, touching my hand. I pulled away. We found a wonderful place, she continued. Not permanent, just support. You'd be comfortable. And my house? I asked. Mark answered too fast. We'd manage things while you rest. Manage. That night, I packed a suitcase. Not because I was leaving, because they needed to think I was. The next morning, I told them I'd scheduled a weekend retreat. Quiet, I said. Time to think. Dana hugged me tightly. You deserve it. I left my phone on the kitchen counter and drove to a hotel across town. From there, I made calls. The real estate agent Samuel recommended was efficient, discreet. He walked through the house with a practiced eye. Good bones, he said. Great location. I want it sold, I said. Quickly. Quietly. He raised an eyebrow. Occupied? For now. Within 48 hours, we had interest. Cash buyers. Investors. At the same time, Samuel filed the last documents. The trust activated. The video evaluation logged. A new will recorded. Everything aligned. I returned home Sunday evening, suitcase in hand, expression soft. "Feeling better?" Dana asked. "Yes," I said. "Much." Christmas morning came with snow, rare for Asheville. The house looked like a postcard. Dana cried when she saw it. During dinner, Mark raised a toast. "To family," he said, "and to new beginnings." I lifted my glass. "To clarity," I said. No one noticed the realtor sign go up 2 days later, not until it was too late. And as the year closed, with lights glowing and carols playing softly in the background, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. Because the end they planned for me was no longer possible, and the one I planned for myself was already in motion. If you'd like, I can continue directly with chapters 5 and 6 next, maintaining the same pacing, escalation, and cliffhanger structure. The first offer came on a Tuesday morning, disguised as a weather alert on my laptop. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from the mug Thomas bought me in Charleston years ago, the one with a chipped rim I refused to throw away. Dana was upstairs on a conference call. Mark had already left, briefcase in hand, pretending to be unemployed for the neighbor's sake. The email subject line was simple: cash offer received. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked around the kitchen. The counter where my daughter once did homework. The cabinet I'd repainted myself when Thomas got sick because hiring someone felt wasteful. The small crack in the tile near the sink from the night I dropped a cast iron pan after crying too hard. I opened the email. Full cash offer. Above asking. Close in under 2 weeks. My heart didn't race. It steadied. I replied with 2 words. Proceed quietly. From that moment on, time split into 2 versions of itself. The life Mark and Dana thought they were managing, and the one unfolding just beneath their feet. Dana grew bolder. She began speaking to me in that careful tone reserved for children and the elderly. "Did you remember to take your vitamins? Are you sure you turned the stove off? Maybe I should handle the mail." I let her. Every envelope she intercepted strengthened my resolve. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the backyard. "We just need to get her signature," she whispered. "The judge will see she's not capable. The house will be protected." Protected by them. That evening, Samuel Green called me personally. "They tried to initiate an inquiry," he said calmly. "It didn't go anywhere." My hands tightened around the receiver. "How close?" "Close enough that you need to be gone when this closes." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I began packing selectively. Not clothes. History. I took Thomas's watch from the dresser drawer, the photo albums from the hall closet, the handwritten recipe cards from the kitchen stained with decades of use. Dana noticed the empty spaces. "Spring cleaning," I said. She smiled, but her eyes lingered too long. 3 days before closing, the realtor called again. "We need access for a final walkthrough." I hesitated just long enough to appear uncertain. "Of course." Dana volunteered to be home. "I'll make sure everything looks good," she said. The walkthrough went smoothly. Too smoothly. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt off. Not fear, instinct. At 2 a.m, I got up and checked the drawer where I kept my original documents. It was open. The folder was still there, but lighter. I flipped through it, my pulse loud in my ears. Copies missing. Pages shifted. They had been searching. I closed the drawer and sat on the bed, heart pounding. Not with panic, but with clarity. They knew something was happening. They just didn't know what. The next morning, I left early. I drove to a furnished rental on the other side of town. Small, quiet, anonymous. I changed my number. I slept for 4 uninterrupted hours for the first time in months. On closing day, I didn't go near the house. I sat in Samuel's office, hands folded, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights. "Funds received," his assistant said. "Transferred as instructed." I exhaled slowly. The house was no longer mine, but neither was the trap they built around it. I left the office with a folder under my arm and a future that belonged only to me. That evening, Dana texted me. "Where are you?" I stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down. Let them wonder. Because tomorrow, they would learn what it felt like to reach for something that was never theirs. They found out at dusk. I know because Samuel called me, voice tight, with something that sounded almost like admiration. "They tried," I smiled. From my rental small balcony, I watched the sun dip behind the trees. The air smelled like rain and distance. I imagined them pulling into the driveway, arms full of groceries, routines intact. Dana reaching for her keys. Mark already irritated, already rehearsing complaints. Dana would try again. Harder. She always did. Mac would check the garage code, the back door, the spare, and then they would see the envelope. I had taped it to the front door myself that morning, my hands steady, my heart calm. Inside, just one page. This house has been sold. All personal belongings have been placed in storage. Instructions enclosed. No signature. No apology. My phone buzzed. Voicemail after voicemail. Eleanor, this isn't funny. There's been some mistake. You can't do this. Call me right now. I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the small table, listening to the quiet. No footsteps overhead. No whispers through walls. Just me. An hour later, another call came through. Unknown number. This is Attorney Blake, a man said briskly. I represent Mark and Dana Collins. We need to discuss the legality of your actions. You can discuss them with my lawyer, I replied, and hung up. The next morning, Samuel sent me a forwarded email. Emergency petition denied. Insufficient grounds. Competency established. They had tried to declare me unfit overnight. It hadn't worked. By noon, the messages stopped. Silence replaced outrage. That afternoon, I walked through my new neighborhood, past gardens, past women my age laughing on benches, unburdened. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. 2 days later, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. Dana's handwriting. Careful, controlled. She wrote about misunderstanding, about stress, about family. She asked where I was staying. I folded the letter and put it away. I wasn't kind enough to rescue them from it either, because what they lost wasn't a house. It was access to my labor, my guilt, my silence. And as I sat there, sunlight warming my hands, I realized the real revenge hadn't been selling the house. It was choosing myself without asking permission, and the consequences of that choice were only just beginning. Silence has a sound when you're not used to it. For me, it sounded like mornings without footsteps overhead, like coffee brewing without anyone asking if I'd made enough, like my phone staying dark for hours at a time. At first, I didn't trust it. I kept expecting a knock, a demand, an accusation dressed up as concern. Years of anticipating other people's needs had rewired me that way. Even in freedom, my body stayed alert, like a dog waiting for a whistle that never came. I stayed in the furnished rental for 3 weeks, long enough for the sale to fully settle, long enough for Mark and Dana to exhaust every legal angle they thought they had, long enough for their panic to curdle into something quieter and more dangerous. Resentment. I knew it when Samuel called me one morning, his voice careful. "They've been asking questions," he said. "Not about the house, about you." My stomach tightened. What kind of questions? Where you bank, who you talk to, whether you've been seen with anyone new. I laughed once, sharp. "They're fishing." "Yes," he said, "and fishing gets aggressive when it's starving." That afternoon, I decided it was time to be seen again. I moved into a small townhouse near Hendersonville. Brick exterior, white trim, a single dogwood in the front yard. Nothing flashy, nothing that would trigger curiosity. The lease was in my name alone. No forwarding address tied to my old life. The neighbors waved. They didn't ask questions. I liked them already. I signed up for a watercolor class at the local art center. Tuesday mornings, 12 women, all older, all carrying their own quiet histories. No one introduced themselves by what they had lost or who they had sacrificed for. We introduced ourselves by color. "I like blues," I said. "All kinds." That night, as I washed paint from my hands, my phone rang. Mark's name lit up the screen for the first time since the sale. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His voice was different. Not angry, controlled, almost gentle. "We need to talk," he said. "There are things you don't understand, decisions that affect all of us." All of us. I deleted it. The next day, Dana showed up. I was in the garden, kneeling awkwardly, trying to coax life out of soil that hadn't yet learned my habits. I didn't hear her approach until her shadow crossed mine. "Eleanor," she said. I looked up slowly. She stood there, in sunglasses and a tailored jacket, lips pressed tight, the picture of composure, barely holding. "You found me," I said. Her jaw tightened. "You disappeared. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "We're family." I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. "You treated me like an asset." Her eyes flashed. "We treated you like someone who needed help." "No," I said calmly. "You treated me like someone you could manage." Her voice dropped. "You humiliated us." I tilted my head. "You tried to erase me." For a moment, the mask slipped. I saw it then. The fury, the entitlement, the belief that love was a debt I owed forever. "This isn't over," she said. I smiled, small and tired. "It is for me." She left without another word. That night, I slept deeply, too deeply. I woke to Samuel's number flashing on my phone at 6 in the morning. "They filed again," he said. "This time, it's personal." My chest tightened. What did they do? "They're contesting your competency retroactively, claiming undue influence. Fraud." I closed my eyes. "And," he added, "they're naming someone you didn't expect." My heart sank. "Who?" "Your daughter." The silence that followed was heavier than any anger I'd felt before. Her name was Julia Price. I hadn't said it out loud in months. Julia lived in Oregon, had for years. We spoke on holidays, sent cards, maintained a careful distance built from old disagreements and newer silences. She had always been closer to Mark, trusted him, believed he had my best interests at heart. I'd let that happen. Now, according to the filing Samuel sent me, she was claiming concern, confusion, manipulation. "She says she doesn't recognize your behavior," Samuel explained. "That you've changed." I stared at the document, my hands steady, my heart anything but. "She says I'm confused," I said quietly. "She says she's worried," he corrected gently. Worried was the word people used when they wanted permission. Permission to step in, to take over, to decide. I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to call her, to explain, to fix it. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the window and watched the dogwood sway in the morning breeze. "What are my options?" I asked. Samuel didn't hesitate. "You can fight quietly, or you can make this public." I turned back to him. "How public?" "Depositions, recorded testimony, financial disclosures. Everything laid bare, including family secrets, including sacrifices no one had acknowledged, including the truth about who paid for what and when." I thought about Julia as a teenager, about the college tuition I covered without complaint, about the loans I took out without telling her, about the way she stopped calling when she didn't need anything anymore. "Do it," I said. The deposition was scheduled for mid-February. In the meantime, Julia called me. Her voice was careful, polite, like she was speaking to a stranger. "They say you're not well," she said. "Do you believe them?" I asked. A pause. Too long. "I don't know," she said. "You didn't tell me you were selling the house." "You didn't ask," I replied. She sighed. "Mom, this looks bad." "For who?" "For you." I smiled sadly. "For the first time, I'm not worried about how it looks." She accused me of secrecy, of selfishness, of shutting people out. I listened. Then I told her about the forged concern, the intercepted mail, the attempted conservatorship, the calls to doctors behind my back. She was silent. "I have documentation," I added. "You'll see it." The deposition day arrived gray and cold. I wore a navy suit, low heels, my hair pinned back neatly. I looked every inch the woman I was. Across the table sat Mark, Dana, Julia. They avoided my eyes. When it was my turn to speak, I told the truth. Not dramatically, not angrily. I spoke about years of unpaid labor, about trust abused, about the quiet ways people erase women once they're no longer useful. I watched Julia's face change as evidence appeared on the screen. Emails, voicemails, timelines. The room shifted. After 4 hours, the judge leaned forward. "This court finds no evidence of incapacity," he said. "On the contrary." He paused. "There is evidence of manipulation." Dana went pale. Mark stared at the table. Julia looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Outside the courthouse, she reached for my arm. "I didn't know," she whispered. I stepped back, gently. Now you do. That night, alone in my townhouse, I poured a glass of wine and sat in the quiet. The legal battle was over, but the emotional one had only just begun. Because winning in court doesn't guarantee peace. Sometimes it just clears the space where peace might finally grow. Winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no rush of triumph, no cinematic release. Just a strange stillness, like the air after a storm when debris hasn't settled yet. The court had ruled in my favor. The petitions were dismissed. The accusations dismantled, piece by piece. And yet, something inside me stayed braced. Julia didn't call after the hearing. Not that night, not the next morning. I expected a message filled with apologies or explanations, something to soothe her conscience. It didn't come. Instead, 3 days later, I received an email. Long, carefully worded, full of therapy language and softened edges. She wrote about fear, about being misled, about wanting to repair things slowly. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. The neighborhood park was quiet. Early spring buds clung stubbornly to branches, unsure if they were welcome yet. I sat on a bench and let the sun warm my face, listening to children laugh somewhere in the distance. For the first time, I didn't feel obligated to respond. That was new. Mark and Dana, on the other hand, did not take silence well. They sent letters through attorneys, not demands anymore, but suggestions, mediation, reconciliation, closure. Closure is a word people use when they want relief, without accountability. Samuel forwarded everything to me, each time adding a simple note. No action required unless you wish. I didn't wish. What surprised me most was how quickly my body began to change once the pressure lifted. I slept deeper, ate slower. My shoulders dropped an inch. The constant ache between my shoulder blades eased. At watercolor class, I painted a door. Not a real one, just an impression. Light spilling through the crack. No handle visible from this side. The instructor nodded. You're painting boundaries, she said. I smiled. One afternoon, I ran into Dana at the grocery store. She was thinner, taut. Her smile strained as she spotted me in the produce aisle. Eleanor, she said, like my name tasted sour. Dana. We stood there, oranges between us like a buffer. You didn't have to destroy us, she said quietly. I picked up an apple, weighed it in my hand. You weren't destroyed. You were exposed. Her eyes hardened. Mark lost opportunities because of this. He lost access, I corrected. She leaned closer. Family forgives. I met her gaze. Family doesn't forge concern. She walked away without another word. That night, I sat at my small dining table and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Financial statements, loan records, receipts. I saw my life laid out in numbers. What I had given, what I had absorbed, what I had never asked to be repaid. A thought settled in slowly, dangerously. I had more power than I'd ever used. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to use it, not defensively, but deliberately. Because karma doesn't always come on its own. Sometimes it needs a nudge. The invitation arrived in late March, Julia's handwriting on the envelope. Careful, familiar. It was addressed to my new place. She had found the address. Inside, a single card. Dinner. Just us. I want to listen this time. I set it down and stared at it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted answers. Not for closure, for clarity. We met at a small restaurant halfway between our cities. Neutral ground, white tablecloths, soft lighting. The kind of place where conversations are meant to stay contained. Julia looked older, more guarded. She hugged me awkwardly, like she wasn't sure where she stood. We ordered. Small talk hovered, brittle and polite. Then she spoke. They convinced me you were isolating, she said, that someone was influencing you. Who? I asked. She hesitated. Mark. Dana. They showed me things. What things? Selective emails. Edited messages. They made it sound like you were being taken advantage of. I nodded slowly. And you didn't think to call me. She looked down. I thought I was protecting you. No, I said gently. You were protecting the version of me that made you comfortable. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. And I did. That was the most painful part. We ate quietly for a while. Then I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table. What's this? She asked. Transparency, I said. Something our family lacks. Inside were copies, tuition payments, loan agreements, transfers, the silent scaffolding of her success. I never showed you these, I said, because I didn't want gratitude. I wanted trust. She stared at the pages, her face flushing. I didn't know, she whispered. I know. That night, as I drove home, I felt lighter. Not because things were fixed, but because they were finally honest. 2 weeks later, Samuel called with an update. Mark's consulting firm is under review, he said casually. Unrelated to you, but timing is interesting. I raised an eyebrow. Why? An anonymous report flagged financial irregularities, expense misrepresentation, misuse of funds. I smiled slowly. I hadn't filed it. But I knew exactly who had. Dana had once bragged about their accounting shortcuts, assuming I wasn't listening. The truth has a way of surfacing when people stop protecting it. By the end of April, Mark was suspended pending investigation. Dana's social media went dark. Julia called me one evening, voice subdued. They're struggling, she said. I closed my eyes. I know. What do we do? She asked. I looked around my quiet living room. The plants thriving on the windowsill, the painting of the door drying on the easel. We let them face what they built, I said. After I hung up, I realized something else. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. And the scales were finally evening out. Karma didn't arrive loudly. It didn't slam doors or raise its voice. It settled in slowly, like dust after furniture has been moved, revealing outlines people forgot were there. Mark's suspension became a termination. Within 6 weeks, the firm cited ethical discrepancies and loss of client confidence. Neutral words, polite words, the kind that follow you quietly and make future conversations shorter. Dana stopped attending the social events she once dominated. Invitations dried up. Friends grew busy. They were not ruined. They were revealed. Julia told me this over the phone one evening, her voice low, conflicted. They're saying you set them up. I smiled faintly. Of course they are. They think you reported him. I didn't, I said. I didn't have to. Silence stretched between us. You sound calm, she said finally. I am. That surprised her more than anger ever could have. Spring turned into early summer. The dogwood outside my townhouse bloomed fully, white petals drifting onto the sidewalk like soft punctuation marks. I started walking every morning, the same loop, nodding to the same neighbors. Routine without obligation felt different, chosen. At the art center, my paintings changed. Less gray, more light. Doors opening, windows without curtains. One afternoon, Samuel invited me for coffee, not as a lawyer, as a man who'd watched too many women my age shrink themselves out of habit. You did everything right, he said. You protected yourself. I did more than that, I replied. I stopped apologizing for existing. He smiled. That's harder. Mark sent one final message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a threat. It was a request. He asked if I would speak to one of his former partners, if I could clarify that I hadn't been harmed, if I could help smooth things over. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because helping him recover from consequences would only continue the cycle that taught him there would always be a woman cleaning up behind him. Dana never reached out again. Julia did. She came to visit in June. We walked. We cooked together. Carefully, awkwardly, learning new rhythms. She didn't ask for forgiveness outright. She showed up. She listened. She stayed quiet when stories made her uncomfortable. It wasn't reconciliation. It was respect beginning to grow. One night, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies rise from the grass, she said, I didn't know you could be like this. I looked at her. Neither did I. That was the truth. Because the woman I was becoming didn't exist when I was busy being useful. She emerged only after I stopped being available to everyone else. The letter arrived in July. No return address. Just my name, written carefully. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the table and went about my morning. Coffee, stretching, watering the plants. I had learned that urgency was often someone else's tool. When I finally opened it, I recognized Mark's handwriting. He wrote about loss, about confusion, about feeling betrayed. He wrote about how families should protect each other. He wrote about how he never meant for things to go so far. He did not write the word sorry. I folded the letter once and placed it in the drawer where I kept old versions of myself. Not as a wound, as a record. Then I closed the drawer. That afternoon, I drove to the Overlook, just outside town. The one Thomas used to love. The one where the mountains stretch endlessly, reminding you how small and temporary certainty is. I stood there, wind tugging at my hair, and thought about the woman I had been when this story began. The woman who overheard her own erasure spoken casually over coffee. The woman who almost explained herself, almost begged, almost stayed. Instead, she chose clarity over comfort, boundaries over belonging, truth over tradition. She didn't win by destroying anyone. She won by refusing to disappear. As the sun dipped low, I felt something settle fully into place. Peace. Not the fragile kind, the earned kind. If you're listening to this story and you recognize pieces of yourself in it, know this: it is never too late to choose yourself. It is never selfish to protect what you built. And it is never wrong to walk away from people who only love you when you are useful. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like it. Share your thoughts or your own story in the comments. And subscribe for more stories about truth, justice, and women who finally reclaim their lives. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living free.